Good morning. It's early AM on May 21st, 2015. Hopefully this will be loaded up onto YouTube in the next 24 hours or hopefully less. My name is Chad Parenteau. I'm the current host of Stone Soup Poetry and an associate editor at Oddball magazine. Welcome to a very special edition of the Oddball Show. The Oddball Show, for those of you who don't know, is a joint venture between myself, Jason Wright, the founder and editor of Oddball magazine, and Chris Everson and Ivan De Jesus of JP Lime. JP Lime is not only a hip-hop group, but also an entertaining webzine. You can check them out at jplimeproductions.com, and incidentally, you can check out Oddball magazine at oddballmagazine.com, and Stone Soup Poetry at stonesoup.blogspot.com. I think I better up my game and get a real domain address this year. New resolution. Anyway, this is a special, as I said, episode of the Oddball Show. We'll call this episode 6.5. The Oddball Show, in case you don't know, is a show that airs every Thursday, generally from 10 to midnight, although we tend to end before midnight because we need to give ourselves mercy. But in our time together, we talk about an array of issues, and we're one of the only shows that I know of that can incorporate on a regular basis not just mainstream topics, but topics such as poetry and literature. As a matter of fact, in our last show, we covered Deflategate of all things, where you had a poet and three sports fans, guess which I am, talk about Deflategate, and there was even a debate as to whether or not the NFL was less reputable and less trustworthy and less believable than the WWE. Well, that's World Wrestling Entertainment. Yes, I'm the one who initiated that debate. Why do you ask, friends who know me so well? This is a special edition because we're not airing live, of course. We air live. We live stream via YouTube and Google Hangouts every Thursday, or generally every Thursday. We haven't skipped one yet. Hopefully our show will be tonight. But I'm doing a special introduction to a panel discussion that I covered that featured one of Oddball Show's members, Jason Wright. This was a panel discussion at the Massachusetts Poetry Festival. The Massachusetts Poetry Festival is a now annual event that was started almost entirely by January O'Neill. January O'Neill is a Salem State faculty member now, and someone who has been helping to put together an amazing show with poets not only all around the state, but all around the country. It's a fantastic weekend. It's a little mini-con for poets, and it involves almost the entirety of downtown Salem. If you've never gone, it's definitely worth going. It's a great introduction to poetry as well. So not only do you have poets who are big names, you also have the local poets who help make the scene happen, throwing panels. I've thrown a panel and been on a panel or two in my day since the festival has started. This year I did not, so I just made an extra effort to see my friends and attend panel discussions I liked. And this was one of them. This panel, Capable Massachusetts, Poets with Disabilities, took place on Saturday, May 2nd at 12:15, and I'll give you a little bit of the introductory flavor text they used to advertise this event. Most of the time, people with disabilities are spoken about. At Capable Massachusetts, they will be speaking out. Ryk McIntyre and Jason Wright will be joined by Hannah Brown and Lewis Morris for a generational artistic dialogue on disabilities, visible and invisible, and the ongoing struggle, 25 years after the ADA, to build a future where they are not barriers to opportunity. Moderated by poet and organizer Colin Killick of the Disability Policy Consortium. And Colin is also the organizer of Capable Somerville 2014. He's the one you hear speaking. As a matter of fact, you should be able to see the picture of the panelists just before the conversation took place. Left to right, that's Colin, then Jason, then Reginald Morris of Flatline Poetry, followed by Ryk McIntyre, a longtime slam poet who's featured everywhere from Stone Soup to Cantab Lounge, to Lizard Lounge, to Lollapalooza of all places. And then on the far right is Hannah Brown, a member of SOUP, that's the Society of Urban Poets, and a person who has shown up in Oddball as a poet and activist. This is a great conversation, and I don't want to delay it much further. I do urge you to check out the Oddball show, which and links to shows can be seen at oddballmagazine.com, or you can go onto the JP Line Productions YouTube page for past episodes. And without any further ado, let's bring it over to Colin. Thanks for listening.
Actually, thank you everybody for coming out to Capable, Massachusetts. Really happy to see you all here. This panel is really kind of a dream of mine. Remember NPS, National Poetry Slam 2013. I'm trying not to speak as fast as I know. There was a really great session on poetry and disability. I met a lot of people who are now dear friends of mine, and it was talked about a lot there that there weren't really spaces for poets with disabilities. It was a topic that didn't really come up, and it's with the pervasiveness of ableism in our society. I think so many other poetry is so good at addressing so many of our social ills that I didn't hear a lot of disability poetry, and this is, I think, a really exciting step in that, and glad you're all here to share it with us. And now I'm going to stop talking so you can hear from our panelists. So.
Hi, my name is Jason Wright.
I'm Louis M.
My name is Ryk McIntyre.
I'm Hannah Brown.
And Jason, you want to take us off?
Yeah, all right. I'm going to start off with a poem that I wrote. Little subtext to this. I don't know if that's a good word. Anyway, so I'm going to use this.
If you like.
All right, let's do this. So, hello? Does it work?
Yes.
It works. Okay, so I was diagnosed with bipolar in 2002. And I was always thought that I could defeat it. And I think I'm a champion of mental illness, I like to say, to myself, not usually to a crowd. But the poem I wrote was about, it's called Manics Who Can't Sleep, and it's from 2005. And just a brief history of it, there was this friend I had met in a ward, and she got out, and she was really manic, and she asked me to drive to Florida at 2 in the morning, and I said, I'm not going to drive to Florida at 2 in the morning. That's just what I wouldn't do. So I wrote this poem for her, and it's called Manics Who Can't Sleep. I'm going to stand up. Manics Who Can't Sleep. Many are manic either in concubine and street, psych wards where they find no peace, believe in dreams impossible to reach. God bless the manics, let them find solace in their dreams. For I once was and still am manic and believe it to be a strain on the brain that nobody sees. To believe in things, to dream things, to feel things. The burning inside, an indignant flame that no medicine or amount of sleep can tame. A song with a million verses with no chorus or refrain. The world outside bores us and sees us as insane. Mania, depression, both each a lesson. One feels so good like a never-ending sex session. The other feels like clammy hands on wet skin molesting you over and over again, kicking your face until there's no light in your eyes. Then the clouds lift, the sun splits, and then comes the bright side. If I had never lived through a mania, I would not be who I had become. Sick to some are seen as dumb, but those memories remain in my membrane, being quick as a cat and labeled insane. But oh, how mania feels, your body pulse quickens, thinking things can change and you can change them, and all the rest of this wild embrace that gives a glow to your face and a boost in your step. And when the mania is gone and depression sets in, you're left with the shit you did. How stupid it seems, but how wonderful it was. The pulsing quickness has slowed down and you feel long for a sleep. And in the beginning your dreams are bleak and in the end livid like liquid thinking, both beautiful and bright. Original and ripe, can't sleep through the night, but what is life without manics turning the wheels, using a mind that refuses to yield to make a difference, thinking beautiful things, that the sun shines and the moon lights the night and the stars make shadows that only you can see. The magic of mania, the crippling defeat, when that tsunami of sadness crushes all your dreams, and all that is left is medicine you take again and again, and depression and the urge to feel that beauty again. Sleep well, my friend. For manics who can't sleep. Thank you.
You want to go straight through?
Oh, are we going, we're doing a whole reading?
Or?
Okay, all right, no, I did.
Well, I think I have everybody do one, I think.
Okay, yeah, no, I thought you were gonna say something.
All right. So just write Luis Morez.
There we go.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand up.
File it. All right.
Nice, Lewis. I was young when my mother first learned of my autism. It was the age when memories melted into puddles the instant they were formed, so I don't remember much, but what I do remember is my mother's attempts at teaching me sign language. I couldn't speak, couldn't read or write. The sounds that fell from my mouth amounted to not much more than whimpers, and they would land on the ground with a thud, quiet enough to cause earthquakes and hell. Those whimpers still tremor through everything I touched. The hush of my then non-negotiable silence crossed through my spine and has a home in my bones to this day. The shadow of my quiet shines with a grayness, casting everything in the hue that looks the way hospitals smell when someone dies. A silence so tragic, it has to be mournful. In those quiet mornings, my mother rocked me in her arms, cradling me to hush my tears, and she would whisper prayers to a God she wasn't even sure she believed in. Did she believe in silence? Did she pray to the hum that exists between the stillness when no one is talking? Because silence, it terrifies me. I was young when my father first taught me control. Kneel to a floor that reeks of pine sol, consuming the cinders of his own crumbling soul through crack pipes that act as shackles. I remember how those whisper-like crackles emanated from those pipes before they shivered into void when pierced by his coughing. The smoke would billow from his mouth and blossom for a moment into tiny little lotuses, floating, glowing brilliant in the morning sunlight. The hush was a remedy that gave me an excuse to remain oblivious to his drug addiction, and his presence was an echo that would dance through the vacancy where my infant cries should have been. Perhaps my hands hold the weight of his addiction, and my mother's tearful rage serenaded my vocal scribbles because I can't remember. It's if I clench a fist hard enough in my body, I can feel the burden of my hush graffiti across my parents' faces as they would argue. Perhaps they needed to actually hear me tell them that I love them. Perhaps silence is a cancer brewing in the spaces where voices live, take asylum, and make homes. Had I known the value of a voice, I would have cried the day my father left. But what I said was nothing. 10 years later, reading his obituary, his face corrupting the inner inertia of memory into active emotion, what I said was nothing. I was 5 when I said my first words. The immaculate germ of elocution sculpted scribbles into speech. The doctors were stunned. My mom, she credits Jesus. But the hush still visits me. I can still taste the extinction of language underneath my tongue. Its bone-dry flavor trickles down my throat like rancid milk. My lips regret their own existence when I'm at a loss for words unheard. Every sentiment remains lodged in my esophagus, clawing at the wall, seeping through every pore, every open wound patched up. But the hush I chose this quiet, enabled this silence, used my own voice with typewriter ribbons, bleeding ink, reminding me that my voice, it still exists. Whether I acknowledge this or not, so my lips, your lips, our lips, are capable of so much more than silence.
So when I was preparing to do this panel, somebody asked me, what's your disability? And I said, well, I'm physically disabled, recovering alcoholic with emotional issues, so choose. What do you need me to be? Just a people pleaser is really what it comes down to. This will become the kind of a speaks a little bit to that. It's kind of interesting. Before the panel, I realized that when I became physically disabled about 11 years ago, 13 years ago, math disabled too, I didn't really write a lot about it, but as soon as I got to the emotional disability, bam, it started coming out. So what that says about me, I have no idea. Anyway, this is a poem that speaks to my utter distrust of self-help programs. It's called How to Bake Bread in 12 Steps.
Come on, Rick.
Step 1. Don't even try this for decades. Learn to fear the process first. Step 2. Don't even listen to step 1. I mean, it obviously has issues. Have you ever noticed how it always has to go first? Step 3. Start mixing the ingredients together. Realize you don't have everything you need, so you rush out to the store. I mean, you were just going to have some people over for hanging out, but now all of a sudden it's a dinner party. If it's a dinner party, you need fresh bread. Agreed. Step 4. Just because it's so crazy it might work, this time, try reading the directions first. Step 5, suspect the recipe is lying to you. It wants you to fail. There's no way this much water is enough for all that flour. Oh my God, you should have gone to the Mass Poetry Festival instead of the Witch Museum. Really? Realize that your sweet, sweet tears are just what the yeast needed to grow on. But say to hell with the yeast, it doesn't love you. Put as much water in until the dough rolls into a ball, then roll yourself into a ball. Rock gently. Step 7. Put some flour on a cold, dry surface, and then don some long rubber gloves. The flour is so the dough doesn't stick. The gloves, you're not going to want to leave fingerprints. Step 8. Mold the dough until it looks a little bit like whoever it was that hurt you this badly. Add fists. Add fists as often as you need. Your feelings are valid too, damn it. Step 10. Step 9. Let it go, man. Let it rest. I mean, the dough. Let it rest for about 30 minutes. By then, it'll drop its guard. There's no way you're done venting yet. Step 10. You know why resentment is better than a bottle of wine? Oh, both of them get better over time, but with resentment, you can get into it over and over and over. Now it's time to show that dough that step 8 was a walk in sunny lollipop land compared to what's coming up next. Roll your sleeves, regress approximately 853 years, get medieval on it. Step 11. Stop blaming the world and everything in it for what is wrong with your life. But remember to stop blaming yourself too. Remember, you also should have preheated the oven to 450 degrees. It's not a big deal. I don't think we have to get upset about it. I don't think those Mumford & Sons CDs are necessary to you. 12. Take the dough and separate it into 2 halves. Label both of these the future, because that's all we have to work towards. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Feel free to beat the crap out of anyone if they say something that stupid to you when you're in this much emotional pain. But then take the dough and put it in the oven for 35 minutes and take some of that time to reflect on pain that you thought was never going to get any better. Watch as you make it into something that feeds not just you, but maybe even people you don't know, body and soul, and then sit back and give yourself some credit. You did it. You made bread. This will be a little easier the next time.
I'm going to talk about this poem afterwards.
Please.
I sat at a fake wood desk with blue chair attached. You asked me to draw the shortest possible path of a car through a city, handing me a grid of shaded squares with white paths between. Met your request. Dragged my pencil in a straight diagonal from the top left corner to the bottom right. Saw my classmates lying neatly, tracing roads in a descending staircase, got nervous and tried to erase mine, but the eraser was dry, so it smudged my lead, chewed through the paper, left shreds of pink residue as evidence of my mistake, you exclaimed. You drove the car right through the stores, but that's the shortest course, I thought. Red ears, sneak scraping floor, throat tight with tears. Nina laughed. You grimaced. You hadn't expected I'd take your words literally and liberally abstract their suggestions. My school days were full of misunderstandings. I thought a formal preface of therefore would validate my scientific hypothesis that the Frog Prince is real. I thought hip-hop lyrics scrawled on my binders would make up for crumpled papers inside them. I faked falling asleep in class in 2nd grade to avoid questions I was too slow to solve, quit homework for 2 weeks because mine took twice as long as everyone else's. I plowed into buildings I couldn't get around, but instead of smashing walls, I crashed and fell, head and ego bruised. In 6th grade, I failed English. Wrote poems during Spanish, and my friends stopped sitting with me at lunch. They said, just kill yourself. I almost listened. My friends from group therapy and special ed started drinking on the sly and puking alone, and I learned what it meant to watch people drown slow that should have come with you. In high school, my guidance counselor didn't mention APs because my IEP was arbiter of my future, small and bleak, limited by the names you called my neurons. Before you even looked at what those neurons were part of, you only looked at the cast-off group I was part of and sought the shortest path our cells could take out of your student body, like we were cancerous, a tumorous mass pigeonholed in stigma. But you paraded us like props through pink and white halls to boast the diversity of your city that you would even accept. Sped kids, deaf kids, left-handed kids, two-handed kids, can't understand, so let's lump them all together, kids. So now, craft words to crash through your buildings, pick the longest possible weaving, winding path through your streets, jot every detail down, because I learned to keep records when it occurred. This is not a misunderstanding, it's a system, but you better listen to the voices that oil your machine, because we will turn its gears toward revolution. We will take you down from inside out. We know more than you know about. We'll eat you up and spit you out with the gum we stick beneath your fake wooden desks. And shame on you for expecting any less. Says like more about itself, I guess, than I could really say about it. But I grew up with I was diagnosed with what's called a nonverbal learning disability. Word. So someone knows what that is. Yes. Basically, kind of it's a lot of things, but it means I have like really bad anxiety when it comes to certain things. Certain types of communication I'm better at than others, can't really do math too well, and some other stuff. But basically, I kind of grew up in the public school system with that, and with a big kind of degree of feeling silenced and feeling like I was seen for that and for nothing else, but like even my disability itself wasn't really understood. So it was kind of like I was sort of shoved into a classroom with other people who the system just wasn't really familiar with, and that poem is a lot about how kind of art and poetry gave me a voice that I hadn't really had before. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you all. So you'll notice I didn't take a lot of time to read bios for people at the beginning. There are two reasons for that. One, I think you now have a far better idea of who these people are than I could have given you from reading off their extensive resumes. Also, we'd be here, we'd consume the entire panel just reading their extensive resumes. But it's also that people with disabilities spend their whole lives, we spend our whole lives getting defined by other people. And so Hannah has rather quick-witted that she has anticipated my first question, which is, to any of you who care to answer it, who are you, and apart from my nagging, what brought you here?
Mostly the nagging. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I didn't really see myself as a disabled poet until about 8 months ago when I got the diagnosis of major depression, general anxiety disorder, and what I like to call Admiral borderline, because as I said to the doctor, why should the other two get an unearned military rank? And it was, reading about the borderline, which just, the first thing that the pamphlet told me was that the doctors don't like the term borderline because it does not describe what it represents. And my first question was, then why did you just diagnose me with it? It also, in the pamphlet, describing how, borderlines have a commonality of feeling, somehow flawed and broken at the elemental level. I noticed by the end of the pamphlet there were 3 typos, so again, I just think they were trying to make it a kind of multimedia experience. But 2013, when the National Slam was in Boston, was the first time I really thought about disability as an issue that, in slam poetry, it's always been at the forefront of confronting racism, sexism, homophobia, etc. And yet I was at a National Poetry Slam where they described a venue 1.5 miles away as an easy walk. Now, for me, 1.5 miles is not an easy walk, but it also never occurred to me that, a fellow poet of mine who suffers from epilepsy, for her 1.5 miles is not an easy walk. And that, pretty much galvanized us into a group called Viper, which was the panel in 2013, the Visible and Invisible Disability, something, anyway, it was VIIP and &R, so I called it Viper, so it would have, sound cool. Agent of Viper. A lot of the poetry venues are, by their nature, not physically accessible to people who are not two-legged. Barely accessible to those of us who are three-legged, and not at all accessible to people in wheelchairs. The venues have been there for 10 or 20 years, so I'm not sure how we work with that. It's, we can't really say, change your venue location or we won't show up any more than we've not been showing up already. But it at least brought the conversation of, looking for venues that were first floor accessible, to bring up that ableism and to a smaller extent ageism are like the 2 things that slam poetry has not really addressed that much. The ageism is very, very subtle, but it's there in the way that people assume slam is a young person's game. There's huge support for slam, even all the way down to like the grade school level, but you do not see anything like that on the other age, at the end of the age spectrum. I've never heard of poetry slams being offered or writing workshops offered at, say, like retirement homes or that sort of venue. And here's an entire section of the population who doesn't have the same access to poetry. So those are, some of the things that brought me here. Also Lewis.
Actually, me and Rick go back to like when I was a teenager. I am back when I was 2 years old. My mom took me to a doctor because she noticed that I wasn't progressing as far as my brother was. And what the doctor said was that I showed signs of autism. And I'm fuzzy on the details because I was 2. But the phrase my mom used to describe was, you would pretty much need the function of a parent there for the rest of your life in order to live. You won't be able to dress yourself, you won't be able to speak, you won't be able to do any of the things that I'm able to do now. So I lived most of my childhood in special education until I was a teenager, and at that point I realized that I felt like this stifling sense of like silence, like I was just afraid to communicate to people, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused a lot of problems with with my relationship with my family, I've lost a lot of friendships, lost a lot of relationships because of my inability to really communicate exactly what I feel and what I'm trying to say. Poetry was the main avenue that allowed me to be able to do that. I am a person who doesn't want to be defined by their disability. I guess if you were to give it a category, it's high functioning autism, but also I have a lot of issues with depression and anxiety as well. But a lot of my poetry, a lot of my poetry doesn't focus around those subjects, because I think if you're a disabled poet, just like if you're a black poet or a woman poet or a gay and or lesbian poet, you are defined by that label. Everyone expects everything you ever write, everything you ever do to be about whatever your disability is. So if you're black, write poems about being black. If you're gay, write poems about being gay. If you're disabled, write poems about being disabled. And I think the thing that's awesome about panels like these are to show the versatility of poets who do have disabilities. Yeah. And that this thing isn't the only thing we know how to write about. And this isn't the only things our lives revolve around. So I think that's the beauty in things like this. So that's part of the things that brought me here. Also Colin and Rick too. She literally brought me here. So, yeah.
So that was just physical.
Yeah.
It's different. Sorry. We are friends, just friends.
That way the panel fell apart.
Alright. Jason.
Okay. What am I going to talk about? What was the question?
Oh, who are you and why are you here? You can answer it any way you can.
All right. My name is Jason Wright. I'm a poet. I'm an editor of oddballmagazine.com. Started when I was 16. I had a dream that I wasn't being included in anything, so I decided that I would. I had a dream about this 3-ball in my. It was on my hand, and me and my friend at the time were looking for something to do. Being that sports was, I mean, I was, running cross country and then starting smoking cigarettes afterwards is just not a good idea. So that was high school. So anyway, I started this magazine when I was 16, 17 years old, and it grew with me. It grew with me through it grew with me through all the stuff that I've gone through as my life has progressed. I never dreamed that I would have manic depression or whatever I have. I never would have dreamed it. But when I had my first manic episode, it was weird. It was weird. I never thought about it in a million years that would happen to me. And it was a good manic episode until it got weird. It got scary. It got like I couldn't control it. But the one thing I could do this whole time was write. And the only thing I could do was write poetry. And that's why I started Oddball magazine. I was like, I'm gonna be my one-man army. If no one wants to join me, that's fine. That's cool. I'm Oddball magazine, and it just kind of evolved through all of my mental illness and all my struggle and everything that I've gone through. And I don't like to openly talk about mental illness because it has a huge stigma. But I have to say that there were times when I was like, I'm going to kill myself. But I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing. And I developed a lot of work. And then I started Oddball magazine in 2010 because I was waiting at a restaurant, and they were like, stop talking to me, we take my order. I think, kind of thing. I would talk to them about stories and stuff, and just kind of like general, you don't want to think, so you just talk a lot kind of thing to people, because it's like major anxiety and shit, sugar. Anyway,
I think swearing is okay.
I'm just talking. She told me, you have a lot of good things to talk about. You should start a blog. I was like, I've never done a blog before. Well, let's do it. I'll call it Oddball Magazine. I'll call it Oddball Magazine Jagged Thoughts. I ended up becoming more of a zine than I ever thought it would. It's online. It's got 60,000 hits on it, so it's
Readable.
It's readable, and almost a lot of the poets here. Did you say debatable or readable?
I said readable. I
got the stats. I got the back end of my blog. I can tell you what I write. So anyway, I don't know. So that's what brought me here. When Colin said, "Hey, do you want to do a panel?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Absolutely," because when I read poetry, I feel like I belong, and as soon as I'm done, I don't belong anymore. And that's kind of how it works with my life. So that's why I wrote this book, A Letter to the World, because basically I wanted to write a letter to the world that did not understand me, and they still don't. And I walk around this hat, and people are like, "What?" And I'm like, "It's a magazine, chill out, I'm not going to go rob a grocery store and play with maple syrup and I'm not weird, I'm promoting myself." So, I don't, why did I say that? That was the first thing that came to my mind, playing with maple syrup at the grocery store. Hey,
you can dream.
Yeah.
Play with maple
Yeah,
syrup.
probably.
I do that.
Just
every
like-
Saturday. What are you talking
I just want to be a slip and slide or something. Anyway, that's why I'm here. Thank you, Colin.
Hey, my pleasure. Do you want to do some more pieces? Or in the interest of getting, I think people came to see poetry. I have a long list of questions, but anybody feeling it?
You want to just go around again?
I mean,
Yeah,
Sure.
Can I have the mic? I know, I just like holding
Yeah.
the mic. It's all those years of watching hip-hop, or trying to do hip-hop, or just loving hip-hop. Although Tony Bennett sings with a microphone too, so really, I don't know. Best, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know Tony Bennett did the thing with Lady Gaga, right?
He did.
Want to talk about that?
Not really.
Whatever. Alright. So, you'll have a second?
Okay.
So this poem is called New Chapters. I wrote a lot on trains. I write a lot from work to New Chapters. So what New Chapters is about my experiences. So New Chapters. Rays of sunshine streaming through the red line window. That feeling that this is meant for us, that we are where we should be on this journey from manic highs to suits and ties. Sometimes you can only write in your notebook so long until you have to share it. Then the last page is over and it's time to renew and write new chapters. Like laughter ringing from the trains brings me back to the haunted hallways of Belknap, when they made a decision where my first prescription was written. You can't stand still? Having trouble concentrating? Take 2 Ritalin and see me in 2 weeks. 2 weeks passed and the anxiety increased. Take this Depakote for your mood and take this Trazodone for sleep. I was trying to. Turn the page. At a panel in Salem. I was 19 when I first lost it. Thought I was a prophet. Thought I could see myself in stars. Thought sleep was an option and I opted out of it. Finding sleep to be less interesting than really listening to my inner voice speaking, and it began to talk and talk and talk and talk. Sleep was always in my eyes, but I had an overactive mind and people took notice. My lack of focus, my mumbled spirit, each word was a prayer. Each time I felt better, I felt good. I felt too good. I was the link between human and superhuman. I was everything. I was the king, longing for my princess in another kingdom. I was the shit, and I slipped and flipped my life and took 2 steps forward and years back. While friends were taking finals, I made an attempt to make life final. The mania turned into lost thoughts, medicine, and depression. Lost time, untamed aggression. Why did I have to be a martyr? Was my thought progression. I was no martyr. I was a broke man, a kid trying to make sense of the life I lived. That was years ago. I'm still manic, but I learned how to stop it. Lost a lot, but gained a lot from it. Depression remains my co-pilot. God took a seat in the back, but I'm still standing, and I thank him for that. and the friends I still have, and then I'm a college grad, and I got a poetry mag, and a loving mom and dad, and the love I never had, I have. So what if I have to take pills for the rest of my life and have trouble sleeping at night? I have Lisa, and she fits me just right, so much that she's in line to be my wife. There's hope from all of the confusion. Just keep swimming, and you'll eventually reach your own shore. Keep socks in your shoes when you walk, or the blisters will come. Enjoy the breadline sunshine, because the winter will come. And keep living like you're dreaming. Keep living like you're dreaming. Thanks. I don't know if you want that. You're pretty loud already. Let me just, so that poem, the last part is a reminder that if you're manic, when you are manic, sometimes you can't stop. I once walked from Salem on the highway, 36 miles, to Burlington, which wasn't my original destination. My destination was go to New York, to marry Britney Spears, get on Eminem's record label, and meet Puff Daddy. That was what I was going to do. So anyway, I walked 36 miles, and a lot of people say I didn't wear shoes. Of course I wore shoes. I wouldn't have been able to walk too long, but I didn't wear socks. And I had to stop and direct myself because I couldn't walk anymore. And I said, where the fuck is the hospital? It's really loud, just like I couldn't stand it anymore. I was like, where's the hospital? Where's the hospital? Where the fuck is the hospital? And I walked to LaHaye Clinic. And LaHaye? Anyway, I thought it was thought it was some kind of sign. And I got there, and the TV was on. I was like, turn the TV off. I yelled it. I said, turn the TV off. And I hobbled in there. And I said, I need to get my feet cleaned. I got to meet Britney Spears in New York. And they're like, slow down, slow down. So they worked on my feet for a little while. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to leave now. And this guy's like, you're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. So they pumped me full of Ativan. And there was a guy watching me. And for some reason I was talking about Star Wars. It happens, whatever. So I was talking about Star Wars, and I was like, you're the evil empire, whatever. And the nurse comes over, I remember this, the nurse comes over and is like, you okay? Yeah, he's just talking a lot of crazy shit. That's fine, he's going to be okay. But at the same time, there was babies being born. And it was so scary. Because babies were being born, and I was freaking out in my brain at the same time. And eventually the Ativan put me to sleep. And I remember not walking, I couldn't walk. I was in a bed, and they moved me through a hall, and I was like, where am I? And I woke up at McLean Hospital. So that taught me a lot. And while I was at McLean Hospital, which I had a great time at, because it's a very cool place, I wrote a book, and it was called Journal of a Madman. And I haven't published it yet, but I wrote it. And that's just kind of how things go. You know, poetry breeds creativity and madness. So.
So I turned 26 a week ago.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. And I wrote a song about how that made me feel. You know, getting older and all that stuff. So, age 26, nigga, still don't know shit. Look in the mirror, I can't help but notice the bags under my eyes are getting heavier daily. I unload my baggage, but more shit gets added. I felt my old suicide notes to a shredder. If vomited them out beeping like paper jam ever, so I can't escape facts. Can no longer lie to you. My life sucks like every Terminator movie after 4 years from 30. But immaturity and I still remain flirty in this dance of deception, like sex with no protection. You think I got shit figured out? Well, here is a correction. Let's talk some basics. My dreams are faceless, written on the same paper you probably wipe your ass with. I treat the shit I spit on mics like it's gospel. A box for slurred speech into shape, no wonder why it's hostile. God don't like ugly. Imagine my surprise to know that she even likes me, or likely that she loves me. I doubt it. My mind is too clouded by negativity. Anxiety is a ball and chain. Whenever it visits me, it just ain't the same. Every time childhood is mentioned in conversations, All I feel is pain and guilt and regret that I was the prodigal son who turned out to be a lost cause by age 21. Who from sleeping on the couch to sleeping on some public benches, this being poor shit ain't nothing but a game of inches. My home was a brick wall surrounded by police tape, laid awake inside of chalk outlines and waited. At age 11 saw a nigga get shot and then quietly wished that him and I could switch spots. Then I think about my mother and my brother and the skeletons beneath each other's smiles. Think about my mother crying at my graduation day. Her tears stain my memory. Never thought I'd write this. These ashes are getting heavy. Sprinkle some in the air when the realization comes that she cried because it was her last time or was her son. Burn it down.
This poem is informed by two things. One of which I mentioned that I was alcoholic in recovery, and I had this experience of being about 10 or 11 months sober, and listening to people, share saying, "Oh, my life was so crazy, and then I stopped drinking, and now everything's much better." And I was having the exact opposite experience. There are different types of drunks. I was what was called a self-medicator, and apparently that was what kept the borderline manageable for, decades. I just knew that a couple of drinks helped me either, lower the volume on emotions or, occasionally raise the volume up to, where it would be communicable to other people. And then I got this sponsor who does not know from poetry, does not know from sensitivity. If he has an emotion, he goes and works it out by slamming his friends up against hockey boards or, dirt biking down vertical canyons, kind of thing. So he will give me advice and I will, try to call him on it, and he just does not take my shit. And he suggested once a gratitude list. No. And I, really acerbic, I just turned to him and I'm like, no, I don't have anything to be grateful for. He's like, come on, you gotta think of something. I'm like, I'm grateful for the asteroid that didn't crash into Earth yesterday, ending all life. He's like, write it down. So, like I say, he will not chicken. So this is called Thankful. The three things I hate about gratitude lists are they are trite and empty exercises, they're the kind of pointless navel-gazing fit for hippies, and, damn it, they work. But sometimes I'm just so busy being grateful for all the things that I have that I forget to be thankful for all the things that are not, and never were, and so won't be. I am grateful for every asshole that did not cross my path today. Thank you, weird-looking mole that is not on my cheek, for the terrible face cancer that you are not. Oh, not out of control city bus, thank you for not hopping the curb because your driver didn't heart attack because he's got his blood pressure under control. I'm grateful for all of my lovers that weren't serial killers.
Yes.
And grateful the question never came up at the time, would have been awkward. And when this body fell ill, when all this beauty grew disability, I became grateful for every test that told me nothing, but ruled out a cornucopia of cancer, an alphabet of hepatitis. Thank you, every damn disease I was tested for not being what's killing me slowly. And what's killing me slowly? Thank you for having about the same organizational skills as me. No rush, take your time, I'm just too full of life. So now when someone asks me, why do you carry the cane? Maybe I answer, well, if I don't, it has a hell of a time getting around by itself. But often I just look at them and deadpan, shark attack, happy, and walk away. Thank you, unhappy accidents, for all the near misses I never saw coming. For every shark that passed me in the night and kept on swimming. For every guardian angel I wore down to the wing nubs. I am grateful for that asteroid that wasn't the size of Nebraska and didn't crash into Earth, killing all life. Thank you, luck of the draw. Thank you, skin of my teeth. Thank you, wire, for letting me under just one more time. Thank you, Facebook, for not causing face cancer. I don't know if that's true, but I hope so. I'm on Facebook a lot. This is my song to all creation, for all the chance loopholes, the small odds in my favor, for every bad thing that could have happened today and didn't. God, just for today, let me be grateful for nothing. Upcoming book, Death to the Two-Legged. We're working on the title.
What, you want me to do a poem?
If you'd like.
Alright. So, next poem I'm gonna do is, so I'm feeling what Louis said about how, like, you know, we write stuff about other things too, and so I want to do a poem that's about something else, and it's a poem that, means a lot to me and to a lot of parts of myself, and it touches on a lot that's gotten me through the difficult stuff. So I'm just grabbing this. Love. It's what I heard in my Zeta's voice as he told me where he found all his tiny vases and handed me my favorite. It's what I tasted in our matzo ball soup, and even in the dreaded gefilte fish. It's what I saw in my bubby's right hand as she pointed to boxes and crossword puzzles, letting me solve the clues, giving me lots of hints and all the credit. It's what I felt in my father's stories of Zeta in World War II, how he came back so poor he worked 80-hour weeks and still made a point of embracing my bubby in warm arms every night, and my bubby smiled with the golden sweetness of fresh challah love. Was Abraham emigrating from Russia? They changed his name from Babinski to Brown, and when I heard this, I vowed to always remember both last names. I came from these stories. From the JCC in Providence, where I glued Israeli flags out of tissue paper and learned with two triangles facing opposite directions you can make one Star of David. I came from tears, drunk from cups, remembering genocides, and not just ours. They all tasted salty at Seder's. I came from healing. Over meals grown from mustard seeds of faith, from faith that had room for everyone at its table, from hearts as big as the Middle East, funerals like birthdays full of laughter and music. I came from Russia, but my Russia is not Putin. I came from Israeli farmers, not from bombs in Palestine. I came from a Judaism that loves Islam, and those who hate it may be bloodline, but they are not family. Because where I come from, we cry for the Holocaust, and we cry too for its modern repetition, because we know it's far harder to be black or Muslim today than it is to be a Jew in America, so we cry for our history. But we cry too for how violence has been transferred, been mirrored in the blood, now mass shed in our name. Where I come from, we say, do not shoot. In our name, where I come from, we say, do not bomb. In our name, where I come from, we know better than to think any hands are clean of blood. But if we see a child in rubble, we will pick her up and try to find her a warm place to sleep. Where I come from, we know prophets sleep on concrete. Without roofs or bed sheets, yes, I came from dancing feet and outstretched palms, from psalms that don't condemn those who pray differently, because we really don't pray that differently after all. We're all trying to build homes with our love, and where I come from, love's a country all its own. Where kugel and latkes are grown from mustard seeds, where faith has room for everyone at its table, where God sings in infinite accents, and none of them are political or televised, but they're all testaments to revolution. And where I come from, conviction is not a prison, but a warm heart, opening, quiet, firmly whispering, there's room here. There's room.
I think this is perhaps the time. I think we may take a couple questions from the audience. Does anyone have burning things on their minds?
I got one thing that came to mind with you guys, where if you have a bar, and the bar is bent up like this, where we're trying to hide everything of who we are, and then the bar is bent down where you try to say, this is who I am. And I came over here, Rick had asked if anybody was going to be deaf. My wife is deaf, so that I think, to see if I was going to interpret for anybody here. But you guys, I think the goal that I saw today is that you're putting the bar right in the middle, and you can choose to speak about who you are, but you can also choose to speak about flowers or anything else. And it's a cool thing to be able to embrace all the parts of what we are, and all you folks showed me that today.
Anybody else? I've got a quick, I got a quick whip round question, I think, and maybe we can get into one last round. But in a few sentences, what in this domain of stuff is the stupidest thing anyone has ever said to you? For bonus points, the stupidest thing at a poetry show if you've got one. All right, you can go first. You got something jumping out at you.
So the first thing that came to my mind before you mentioned at a poetry show is something that happened at a poetry show. So the first time, one of the first times that I did, the first poem I did, which I call Sped, publicly, a man, this nice man, came up to me afterwards and said, wow, but you seem so intelligent. Yeah. So, while that for the most part speaks for itself, I do have some things to say about that, which are, poetry is, one of the reasons poetry is as meaningful as it is to me is it's the first space that I've really felt like I could actualize my full self, and that the things that are different about me in some ways are actually like assets instead of just tolerated. So the concept that my being in a SPED classroom for so much of my life, which is, I don't know, I think that's more a fault of a system that pigeonholes people than it is for the way I learn. But that aside, the concept that would be equated to a lack of intelligence, even in a circle that is about the form of art that to me pulls me away from that, that was actually really eye-opening for me. It's kind of like I forgot that this is so pervasive that even people in my quote-unquote circle have that dug into them. So I think that's part of why I think these conversations are so important, and I'm grateful to be a part of them.
Apparently we've got 5 minutes. Yeah, just very quickly, I work for Disability Rights Organization, and I have a motor skill dysfunction, right? You know, and I'll say, oh, why do you work for this organization? I, you know, my fine motor skills are impaired. Oh, you seem completely normal. It's like, huh?
In 2011, I was driving to it's National Poetry Slam in 2011, which was in Cambridge. I was driving to one of the venues, and I was giving somebody a ride. And at the Cantab, they actually have a handicapped space in front of the Cantab, which happened to be open, so I just pulled right in. The person I was giving a ride looked at me and said, God, you guys are so lucky. I mean, parking is so easy for you.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at him and I just deadpanned, you know, it makes 11 years of constant pain that much more worth it. He said, yeah. And he said, disabled people are so cool. And I looked at him and I said, we actually prefer Americans have better parking.
The first time I did Hush was in a room with like hundreds of people. And there's nothing I hate more than the condescending, I understand the hugs after you do a poem that's really emotional, you know? It's just like, you know, one of my instructors, this woman named Elaine, you know, she's kind of an idiot, but you know, she just walked up to me and she's like, "It's gonna be okay, Lawrence. It's gonna be okay." I'm like, it's already okay. I did the goddamn poem. and yeah, so I'm fine. I wrote the shit. I know. You know, and there's a lot of, you know, responses like that. Like anytime anyone does a poem about, you know, a disability or like something traumatic that happened to them, you get the people out of the woodwork who want to give hugs, and it's like, don't touch me. I don't want you to touch me. So yeah, so I don't do hush that often anymore because people like that just kind of, oh my God, you poor thing. You know, let me give you a hug and tell you that you're a beautiful snowflake and that you're special.
I just want you to know I don't understand it.
Okay, well, I tend to not talk about my stuff to people, but I will talk about poetry just for a second. So, I went on a radio show, and they said, you know, I don't really like poetry. It's all roses are red, violets are blue. And I'm like, what? Roses are red, violets are blue? So that was like the kind of response I got about poetry. So I could have been like, oh yeah, I also, you know, whatever stuff going on. Because a lot of people don't get stigma. I mean, a lot of people just don't understand. Because there's a lot of people who don't understand. There's millions of people who don't understand you. And really, all you got to do is, I wrote poetry. That's what I did. That's when I'm gone. You'd be like, he wrote poetry. That's what he did. You know. I mean, that's my thing. No one's ever really gone up and said. I just thought it was when someone said something about poetry. I was like, you don't get it. It's my blood. It's my life force. It's what I breathe. When you think it's all roses or red, violets or blue, you're fucking crazy. Not me.
I think we've got space for like one piece, unfortunately. I have a thing. If anyone is burning, if anyone has one burning piece to do.
Well, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this year is going to be the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's incidentally going to be a celebration on June 22nd on the Common, July 22nd. Thank you, Allegra. And because of my continued badgering, it will include some poets, including me. This is probably what I'm going to read there. So, called 3 Generations. It is 1927. A warm May day in D.C., and Oliver Wendell Holmes, black-robed justice, is sending 18-year-old Carrie Buck to be sterilized. She has been in an asylum since her foster parents had her declared feeble-minded 9 months after leaving her alone with their upstanding son. Holmes wrote eloquent dissents on behalf of criminals, but had no empathy left for Carrie, a prostitute's daughter. They examined her daughter Vivian for 10 minutes, dubbed her feeble, below average as well, and declared, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. They called it eugenics, pruning undesirables from the human family tree. Carrie was their test case, and for decades, thousands followed as the state tried to rid itself of us. It is 1990. I am 6 weeks from being born, and at the bottom of the steps of the Capitol, people are preparing to climb for their rights. And mine too, though my parents don't know it yet. Slowly they rise, step by step, chairs and crutches shed, dragging decades of denial and pain, dragging a nation at long last into a sense of shame, chanting, "Vote now," at the top of rasping lungs. And 3 months later, the ADA, one more chunk of Jefferson's promissory note redeemed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that it is not our creation that bars us, but their walls. It is 2015 and we are just getting started, because justice is blind and America is still kicking her cane away. Because I look around and see nothing but more steps we must drag ourselves up, and most of all because all this can be fixed. So be bold, be suspicious of tradition, be a voice chanting and a hand signing, be proud, be perfect just as is, be Carrie Buck's unborn children marching for her memory's revenge, be living proof that we were not extinguished, be never again. Because until every barrier is broken, every bigot brought low, until every child who is born can know that this is a world where their body bars them from nothing, then 3 generations will be nowhere near enough.